start with a brief period of meditation. So start by, is my voice clear? Is it audible? Yeah, okay. So let's start by gently closing our eyes and adopt a posture that's comfortable and at the same time a posture that's stable. So it doesn't matter if you're sitting on a chair or on the floor. The idea is to bring in some stability and comfort into the posture. So some things that help with stability is to keep the spine and the neck erect, the chest open, the feet firmly resting on the ground. We just pay attention to our posture for a couple of seconds and see if you need to make any adjustments. By being supported by this stable and comfortable posture, we bring in an attitude of gentleness and attentiveness over these next few minutes, over this period of meditation. So the stability is a gentle stability, and the comfort is an attentive comfort. As the body stills itself, stabilizes itself, and as we are gentle and attentive, these are the qualities that our mind will adopt as well. Nothing willful. Let's take a minute to note the mood of the mind, just observing, not correcting or changing. We gently broaden our attention to include the breath. Just being attentive to the breath. Nothing willful, very gentle. We watch the in-breath and the out-breath. Just be with it. No need to elongate or shorten. No need to make it extra perceptive or make it extra soft. Just the way it is. As we notice the breath, we also notice that there's really no effort required to breathe. This is a valuable insight that we can glean from watching the breath. So as we are attentive to the breath, let's also be attentive to that feeling of non-resistance as a breath comes in and as a breath goes out. And when there's non-resistance, is there a need for volitional effort? Just abide in that non-resistance. The lungs and the body welcoming each in-breath. Lungs and the body gently sending it on its way, welcoming a new breath. This simple process that we take for granted, the simple process that happens every moment of our lives, doesn't need me. I'm not doing anything. How does that feel? Am I the one breathing? As we abide in this non-resistance, non-effort, non-self. We can glean a little more. None of this requires thought. There's no doer. And if I don't do, what can I own? Just notice what happens at a bodily sensation level when this is the attitude. You don't have to make this a technique or a process. It's just a gradual, gentle unfolding as we pay attention. As we pay attention to the non-resistance and non-effort, the breath can possibly just fade away. That's fine too. as we wind down this period of meditation, let's take a moment to really appreciate this opportunity to be able to observe non-resistance, non-doing. Disappearance of the ego. As you hear the gong, gently open your eyes.
So Jane will request the Dharma talk, Bante. Please unmute, Jane.
Ramachaloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjaliana Divaramayachata Santi Dasahata Parajakajatika They say to Dhamman Anukampiman Pajam.
Thank you, Jane. That was beautiful. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang gunuttarang upajjayang namassami. Okay, so as is customary, I thought I'd share a few thoughts. And we're in today's, we're in the early part of May, 3rd of May. And over the past month, we have the community here, the residents and the monks and the novices. We finished our 3-month winter retreat. And April is usually a time of planning. So we have 3 months of retreat where we put everything down, or we try to. It's very busy for those who are involved with the accounting and finance aspects of the monastery, because that's when tax receipts have to go out. And I've also been kind of battling a lot of sickness and recovery. So it hasn't been that kind of deep for me, but yeah, we generally spend 3 months with an attitude of introspection, with an attitude of commitment to deepen our practice, and as far as possible to let the world do its own thing. So then when we come back into the swing of things, there's usually a flurry of activity. We've got to get ready for the guests who come. We've got to attend to repairs and maintenance and things that have been broken. And it's also the time when we often compare notes. How did the winter retreat go for you? How did the winter retreat go for me? You hear a range of responses to that. And in general, the theme that, or a common thread amongst most of these responses is, am I doing this properly? Am I meditating properly? Am I progressing spiritually? And this seems to be a common theme, whether you're on winter retreat or not. Sometimes it just comes up. And I thought it might be worthwhile kind of dwelling on this a little bit. A few months ago, I was flipping through one of the books at the library here at the Sarana, and this little note fell out. I couldn't recognize the handwriting, but the note actually said, "What is not the practice?" And I thought that kind of, I was reminded of that as we were sitting and talking about, am I progressing? Am I doing this right? Am I meditating properly? And while it's a valid thought, it's a valid question, but taking it too far, I'm not sure how helpful it would be. So this idea of progress somehow implies an idea of advancement. And usually words like progress, advancement, and especially in kind of the way we address meditation, immediately or quickly can take us to this idea of attainments. But then when we look at the schematic of spiritual practice that the Buddha set up, it's not so much about attainment, but it's more about letting go, things falling away. So we all listen to all of these terms like stream enterer, a non-returner, a once returner, and arahant, and things like that. And if we actually look at what happens in that process, we start with this huge lump of fetters or samyojana. And as we go along, as we stick with what we call the practice, all these things are meant to fall away. So it's like, we have it's almost like as if we have many, many layers to this thing that we call me. And as we keep attending to this, each layer keeps falling off. It reminded me of what Ajahn Jayasaro said in one of his talks. And he was talking about Michelangelo's prancing horse, the sculpture of the prancing horse. And apparently someone asked him, oh, when you start with this huge lump of rock, there's just this big rock. And then you work on it, and all of a sudden it transforms itself into this beautiful, realistic image of a horse. How do you do it? So apparently he said, well, I just sculpt away at the bits that are non-horse. So somehow he has that innate ability to look at a piece of stone and to look and to actually visualize the horse in the stone and chip away at the non-horse bits. And that's a beautiful, beautiful analogy, in that that's a lovely way to look at our spiritual lives. It's a lovely way to look at what we are doing. Lumpur Sumedho often says that it's all conditioning, right? And our job is to remove all those aspects that lead to conditioning, or not be so much affected by it. Basically, letting go. So instead of viewing the result of our dedication to spiritual life as progress or attainment, it might be more helpful to look at it as a maturation, as growth, as deepening of understanding. And so we don't get caught into this kind of dangerous area of attainments. Because when we look at the idea of attainments, it's very inspiring, but there's also a lot of self involved. And every morning, Lumpur Viradhammo offers these short readings to us right after breakfast. And now he's reading from Lumpur Sumedho's Don't Take Your Life Personally. And in today's reading, Lumpur Sumedho was talking about this book that Lumta Mahabua wrote about Lumpu Man. And I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but Lumpur Sumedho says, when he read that book, Lumpu Man seemed to be like the Superman, right? Super attainments, communicating with all these beings that we can't see, and communicating with the devas, teaching the devas and all of that. And Lumpur Sumedho says, but when I spoke with all of Lumpu Man's disciples, they said, yeah, all that's fine. But really, he was focused on the end of suffering. He was really focused on this kind of awareness of the way things are, being present, being grounded, being aware. And really, when we talk about the path and the fruit, especially when we look at it from a canonical standpoint, using the Pali terms, magga, which is the path, and the result of the path is phala, fruit. So until this fruit ripens, it's not going to be of any benefit. So we can't hasten that process of ripening. that process of ripening depends on us, depends on many factors, but we actually don't play much of a role in the ripening itself. We could play a role in creating favorable conditions that result in ripening. So I personally, find it quite useful and quite helpful to view this whole kind of this whole pursuit as a maturation process of learning, a process of growth, a process of education. And very often we also hear, oh, I wasn't able to really meditate because I was thinking so much. And, yeah, thoughts can certainly can come in the way of collectedness if we allow them to. So one of the ideas is that we are sitting, we are meditating, we want to be still, we want to be collected, and we want to get this thing called samadhi. And then what happens is all of these damn thoughts keep coming and distracting me, right? I can't concentrate. I can't focus. But is thinking actually the real problem? What I would like to share and probably discuss at the end of this period where I'm sharing is that we focus too much on the content of thought and we don't give enough importance to the patterns of our thinking or to the processes of our thinking. So when we pay too much attention on content, so let's say there's this thought that arises, I'm kind of meditating, and then this thought arises, oh, this isn't working. If I am constantly paying attention to its content, then I'm going to create, first of all, I'm going to magnify it. I'm going to keep going with it. I'm going to run with it. And I'm going to make it bigger than it actually is. So instead of allowing that thought to kind of arise, maintain its course, maintain its momentum, and once its momentum disappears, instead of allowing the thought to vanish, we keep feeding it. We keep giving it more and more energy to run on by simply focusing on the content. But instead of that, if we were to just sit back and say, yeah, this thought has arisen, we're just aware of the thought, then we don't give it that fuel. We don't give it what in Pali is known as upadana. Right? We don't give it that extra momentum by engaging with it. So we allow it to kind of come up and we are just aware, and automatically as its momentum reduces, it passes away. And so if we act, and that's why, during the meditation, I kind of made the suggestion of paying attention to the mood of the mind. So as we begin a period of meditation, if we notice, okay, right now my mind is busy and there are all these thoughts that are buzzing about, or there's a little bit of irritation, there's a little bit of annoyance, or there's a little bit of excitement, then what happens is that we kind of attach to that and we make that our own. So when the thought arises that, am I doing this right? Somehow we latch on to it and we blow up the content to such an extent that we reach the conclusion that, oh my God, I'm not doing this right, or I am doing it right, right? Neither which are very helpful, because we are picking up on the content and we are reacting to that content. We are not allowing a natural phenomenon to be. It's like saying, okay, I've taken a breath in and that's full of oxygen, it's feeding my body, and I'm going to hold it. I'm not going to let it go. Right? It's not going to work. It's got to come out. So thoughts, dealing with thoughts are the same thing. When we approach the content of thought, we magnify it, we multiply it, and we actually make it our own, right? So if the thought arises that I'm sad, over time, you keep engaging with that, and it leads to depression. It leads to kind of a very somber, morose mind state that can be dull, lethargic, that doesn't have that brightness. But if we just allow, first of all, if we are cognizant of the mood of the mind, and we recognize that the mind is now tending to a lot of thinking, and we don't engage with the content of thinking, then all we are doing is paying attention to this kind of stream of thoughts that come and go, come and go, come and go. And as we are just witnessing that and paying attention to that, at some point, the speed of these thoughts kind of the speed of these thoughts kind of decelerate. And we might even have a moment where we are fully aware, the mind is bright, we are fully aware, but without a single thought in our mind, right? And this comes not as a flash in the pan, but this comes because of this dedication and this commitment to just be with the thought, pay attention to its pattern, pay attention to its processes, rather than paying attention to the content. And I think a kind of technical modern term for that would be metacognition. So we're not just cognizant of the content of thought, but we're actually learning about ourselves. We are learning about how we think simply by paying attention, right? And as we just keep paying attention, as we are just aware, these thoughts lose their kind of energy, their speed, their frequency, and they calm down. And this is how we learn to create space around thoughts. We bring in spaciousness to the thinking mind. So all of these exercises that Lumpo Sumedo, Lumpo V, all of our great ajahns, they talk about, notice the end of the thought. Noticing the end of the thought does just that. It allows us to notice space between one thought and another. And by being faithful, being loyal to that pursuit, we incline our minds to actually notice that gap, that space between one thought and another. And this is how we cultivate an attitude of spaciousness, an attitude of thought that's not cluttered. And when we notice the content of thought, right, that we're so fascinated with, that even without us knowing it, we are pulled away. It's usually in the realm of the past, or it's in the realm of the future. It's in the realm of pleasant or unpleasant, sometimes neutral, but we don't tend to notice those neutral states of mind very much because we are naturally kind of, that's boring. We don't need that. But then what really grasps our attention is a thought that's really exciting, or a thought that's really kind of self-deprecating, or a thought that's not very pleasant. And if we look at it kind of objectively, this is what the Buddha refers to in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where, either delighting in pleasure or engaging in self-mortification. Kame sukama sukhali kama yoga or athakila matanu yoga. That's how we do it with our mind, right? So self-mortification does not mean that I wear, I wear a hair shirt, or I kind of flagellate myself, or I lie down on a bed of nails. It could be as simple as having constant thoughts that drag down the chitta, that drag down the mind, engaging constantly in thoughts that do not allow the mind to brighten, that do not allow the mind to uplift. And at the same time, if we are constantly engaged with thoughts that are exciting, that are stimulating, then that's going to be the thought pattern of the mind. And we are going to keep vacillating between excitement, disinterest, excitement, boredom, excitement, depression, kind of there's no balance of the mind. So when we put in a conscious effort and we say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to see if by just noticing the thought and not engaging with the content of thought, I'm going to see what happens to my thinking process. Then we're actually doing something really worthwhile. Because we're not engaged in the content, and we're not constantly kind of vacillating between the pleasant and the unpleasant, between the like and the dislike. There's an actual balance that comes in through the mind. So really, when we talk about maturation on the path, thinking doesn't seem to be that problematic. Now, there are times when we just can't shift a particular thought pattern. Like it might happen that we are getting kind of dull over a long period of time. And when we sit down to meditate, kind of we feel that dullness, we feel tiredness. So maybe at that time, a simple solution would just be to take a nap, right? Refresh yourself and come back to the meditation when we are refreshed. But the other thing that we can also try is this whole idea of anusati. So if our mind is kind of latched on to thoughts that are not allowing the chitta to brighten, then we can actually substitute that thought process that's so unpleasant and that brings us to toxic states of mind. We can actually substitute it with thoughts of things that actually uplift the mind. And there's a lot of value to that. So the word anusati is actually, sati is usually translated as mindfulness, but another way of referring to sati is actually recollecting, and to hold that recollection in our consciousness. And anu actually means something that's deep. Literally in Sanskrit and Pali, anu means an atom, something that cannot be reduced any further. So it means going to the core. So anusati actually means going to the core of recollection, taking that recollection into our very core, into our very nature. And usually these anusatis are divided into three categories. There's certain practices that are devotional in nature. So The standard things are recollections of the Buddha, recollections of the Dhamma, recollecting the Sangha, recollecting the Devas. And that works really, really well if we are predisposed to that kind of practice. But if that doesn't work, there are other alternatives, right? And these alternatives are recollecting our own goodness. So recollecting in traditional in the canon, it's recollecting sila, it's recollecting chaga, and it's recollecting upasama. So sila is we are recollecting something that we've done really well that is in line with our precepts, right? So let's say we've been in a very, very trying situation, and a good way of getting out of that situation is to just kind of massage the truth a little bit, or kind of fabricate something, or even tell a white lie. But instead of that, we consciously chose not to do that, and we consciously chose to stick to the truth. Now that could be a cause of great celebration. It might not have felt great while we did it. It might not have had, it might even have had negative consequences, but later, when we think about it, we could actually pat ourselves on the shoulder and say, I did a good job with that. I didn't yield. I actually did something that I've been committed to, that I wanted to be committed to. So recognizing virtuous actions, virtuous qualities, virtuous instances that we've had in our own lives, and actually really celebrating that, feeling that, not just at the level of thought, not just thinking about it and letting it go, but to actually feel, how did it feel when I did that? How did it feel? Or how does it feel now when I look back on it and recollect? It generally, it's not, it's generally the power of this kind of altruistic nature within us that gives us this huge uplift, this huge kind of celebration. And chaga, so putting people ahead of us, that's another great thing. So instead of doing things with me and my comfort and my sense of well-being all the time, how about an instance where I put that aside and I did something else for someone? Now that's another great thing that uplifts the mind. And how often is it that we actually think about that? How often is it that we consciously put in an effort to think about that? And again, upasama, so reaching this kind of, recollecting this kind of moment of awe when our sense of self or our sense of ego just dropped away and we are left uplifted because we saw something really beautiful, or we see someone who we really love, or we see something full of innocence and joy. Come to the monastery and see Bruno. You'll see a lot of upasama. So things like that, recollections of things that we have done because of our inherent nature of goodness. It's not something that is remote. It's not something that's removed. It's not something that is created. It's something that springs from within because we have that sense of goodness within, and it's a celebration of that sense of goodness. Then other types of anusatis are anusatis that bring us in touch with the reality of the moment. So recollecting the breath. I mean, what can be more kind of grounding than that, as we just did in the meditation? Recollecting the body, paying attention to the sensations of the body, paying attention to contemplating death, not in a voyeuristic way or in a ghoulish way, but in a way that it's actually real. In my case, my parents are aging. Um, Lumpur is aging. Lumpur Sumedo is aging. All the great teachers we love. I'm speaking from a very kind of monastic background, so please bear with that. But yeah, like I actually think about that. I actually contemplate that because then it doesn't take me by surprise, or it's something that not so much as we prepare for their death. So it's not like if my dad passes away, I'll do A, B, C, and D. Or if my mom passes away, I'll do A, B, C, and D. Yeah, all those things have to be done, and we'll do all those things. But actually, how does it feel within? What is it that our sense of humanness, what is it that it responds to? What is it that comes up? And it's really worthwhile paying attention to that. So those are some ways of kind of shifting mind states or altering mind states. But then when we talk of maturation and when we talk of growth in the spiritual life, there are often signposts. And I'm certainly guilty of this. I don't pay enough importance to those signposts, and I expect something different. And my expectations are A, not realistic, and B, it's something that I have fantasized about in my own imagination. So it's a figment. It has no reality to it. So if it doesn't happen, then it's silly, really, getting disappointed. But then that's what we tend to do, right? So instead of having these unrealistic expectations and having these kind of fantasies that I'll sit still for 6 hours and there should be no thought that goes through my head, and I will be absolutely, my chitta will be absolutely bright and luminous, and there'll be spaciousness, and I'll be floating with the devas. And instead of having all these totally unrealistic expectations. I mean, if it happens, well and good, right? Sadhu, modana, if it happens. But if it doesn't, right, then what are some of the things we can rely on? Well, some of the things that we can rely on is during the process of meditation. So I'll kind of, the way I look at it, and I've started applying it in my own life, is that what happens on the cushion and what happens off the cushion. So we'll talk about what happens on the cushion first, right? So what happens on the cushion is that, first of all, meditation stops becoming chore. Initially, it needs a lot of energy, needs a lot of motivation. And sometimes it may even feel like, gosh, I'm just banging my head against a brick wall. And that's perfect. That's perfectly natural. If that didn't happen, I would say that we're not doing it right. Because we are so used to our mind reacting in certain ways. We're so used to our mind clinging on to things. One of the great forest ajahns, great teachers of the forest sangha said, our mind is so mischievous that it actually goes out looking for trouble. And it's true. It's true. It's not that the mind is just there and thoughts go, thoughts appear and disappear. No, we are guilty of, to the extent that the mind actually goes out. And that's what these sense organs do. That's the doorway for the mind to go out and interact with the world. But instead of, and so when we sit and meditate, right, we're trying to tell our mind, hey, don't do that. Not with any kind of willfulness, not I mean, we all do that when we start meditating too, is that we're either too willful or we're too determined, or we kind of try and conquer and crush the mind. None of that really works. So when we start meditating and we're actually trying to turn the mind away from its tendencies, it's perfectly natural to feel a sense of aversion. It's perfectly natural to feel that you're banging your head against a brick wall. So one of the signposts is that that feeling keeps reducing over time, right? And there is this kind of joy that comes up. And so what used to be a chore now becomes something that I really like doing. And if I don't do it, then I actually miss it. Right? Now, that's a very, very valuable signpost. That's a really good indication that we're doing, that we are ripening, that we are doing something right. There is something blooming and blossoming within us. Right? And it all starts with, instead of an attitude of control, if we start with an attitude of curiosity, then our response is much more in tune with the kind of fruition of this spiritual pursuit, right? So these are some things that happen on the cushion. Off the cushion, some signposts are that there are fewer irritants, right? Things that bothered me a year ago, a year and a half ago, are not, they're losing their strength. It's not that we're completely not bothered by them at all, and all of a sudden I turn into a Mother Teresa. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that what irritated me and annoyed me for, say, half an hour or 45 minutes a year and a half ago, I constantly keep replaying it and think of strategies to mitigate it, or think of strategies to change it, or even think of strategies to ameliorate it. All that keeps coming down, right? It keeps kind of reducing. And so there are fewer things that can irritate us, and the frequency and the strength of their irritation becomes lesser and lesser, right? And as we said, on the cushion, when we sit and we notice that our mind is slowly moving from meditation being a chore to a pleasure, to a joy, to something that's highly uplifting, the immediate expression of that is that we find that when we are off the cushion, our mind does not become hard, ossified, recalcitrant, obdurate, whereas it becomes a little more flexible, it becomes supple. We can easily respond to events proactively rather than react to events aversively or react to events out of greed. And there is a kind of evenness of emotion that's also very, very inspiring. And that happens over a period of time, is that, all of these things like praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and ignominy, and pleasure and pain, we are able to kind of manage these things with a certain level of inner balance, right? So as our mind on the cushion, the less it vacillates between excitement and boredom, the immediate expression of that is when we are dealing with people, when we are out in the world, when we are kind of dealing with situations that are either extremely pleasurable or extremely kind of depressing. we have the capacity to bring in an evenness, a smoothness. We're not swayed that much, right? And these opposites don't really kind of bother us, and we are able to reduce certain toxic mind states that habitually come up because of stimuli that keep that keep affecting us. And so I kind of just want to share this recent this sutta that I read recently, and I think it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, and there's a section of it called the Chitta Samyutta. So Chitta is this householder, but he's obviously really advanced in meditation and has a lot of wisdom. And so a lot of monks come and ask him questions. And one of the monks called Godatta goes and asks him a question. And Chitta actually tries and explains to him the process of how we think. And Chitta says, there are three things that we do in our normal thought process. We are constantly weighing. So, pamana karana, we are weighing, we are measuring. Kinchi karana, we always make a thought into something. And nimitta karana, we actually assign feelings and emotions to these thoughts. So basically what happens is when we think, we are adding all of these to a certain thought, right? And we need all that to function in the world. So when I say, when someone has to make a decision, let's say you have to make a decision about the kind of car that you need to buy, you have to engage in pamana karana. You have to engage in kind of assigning it value, evaluating its features, seeing what you need, seeing what you don't need, seeing whether it fits into your budget, etc., etc. And that's fine when you're dealing with things that need that. But then if we are constantly doing that all the time, then there's a problem. Kinchikarana is kind of making something out of it's like adding a layer. It's to add a thingness to a thought. So our usual process is, let's say I've eaten a fruit that's really, really sour, and I didn't like it at all. So every time I'm presented with a fruit like that, my first reaction is, ooh, is that going to be sour? Right? Is this going to, am I going to experience the same thing that I experienced earlier on? I mean, it's just a fruit, but I'm actually making it into something. I'm making that fruit into this sour experience that I had 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And the last one is nimitta karana. It's like assignation, making a sign out of it. So saying that these are my list. This is my list of experiences that are pleasurable. This is the list of experiences that are not pleasurable. These are things that I like, and hence these are the things that I'll engage with. These are things that I don't like. These are things that I will not engage with. Right? And if we are constantly doing that to the extent of bringing that into our practice, then we are doing something wrong. So the refrain that Chitta tells Godatta is that, okay, if you want to get away from this constant measurement, this constant making something out of your thoughts, and finally making these assignations or signposts or these lists of things that are pleasant, unpleasant, desirable, non-desirable, then you have to engage with the Brahma Viharas. You have to engage with a mind that's full of love, right? And that becomes the counter to all of these natural tendencies that we have. Because when we look at a mind that's filled with love, or a mind that's filled with compassion, or a mind that's filled with altruistic joy, or a mind that's actually, or we have that sense of balance that guides these, and these in turn kind of moisten, enrich, soften the sense of balance, then we're actually looking at a mind that is abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility, without ill will. And so the antidote for this constant kind of measurement and making things up and making these lists is to kind of just step back and cultivate a sense of spaciousness, a sense of acceptance, a sense of non-resistance, and then allowing these things to just fall off over time by themselves, without pushing, without prodding, without trying to be in control. Right? So I thought I'll share that, and I'll leave it there and open to any questions.
Thank you, Bhante. So if anybody would like to ask Bhante a question, a Dharma-related question, if you could use the raised hand, and I'll invite you to unmute. Thank you.
Yes, Anne.
Hello, Venerable
Hi, Anne.
Abbot. It's so lovely to see you. And and thank you very much for your talk. It has come up in my mind about how I'm progressing on the path. And so I want to ask you, who is nestled in Tisarna for many years now, what is the greatest treasure that you have received from your lifestyle at Tisarna? So can you see a difference?
I'm not gonna overthink it, and I'm gonna tell you the first thing that comes to my mind is Lumpur, the teachings he gives, and the lineage that has resulted in his teachings. These are really, really invaluable for me. I mean, just the attitude that Lumpur brings in, and really this whole approach of Lumpur Sumedho, Lumpur Cha, Lumpur Liam, any of our great teachers, it's this kind of non-dogmatic, non-judgmental, very realistic, very pragmatic method. I wouldn't even call it a method, very realistic approach to what we do. That's very, very valuable. And it's in my own life, it's brought about such wonderful things in that it's really I've actually seen a lot of how do I put this? It really opens the heart um, to the realities of each and every present moment. Now, not from any kind of any kind of, I mean, at a very very tangible level. Um, so just this idea of allowing yourself the opportunity to say it's okay to make a mistake, allowing yourself the opportunity to say, yes, I'm lazy, but maybe I won't indulge in laziness right now. Yes, I'm aversive or I'm angry, but I'm not going to express my aversion or anger right now. And really, it's like an osmosis. When you talk to anyone who's lived in a monastery under any of our teachers really don't give all these fascinating, wonderful Dhamma talks all the time. They do, but that's not what they do on a daily basis. They just behave in a certain way, and you watch them, and we observe, and we pick things up from that. So really, this lifestyle, that's what it has afforded me. And of course, if it weren't for the support of all the generous people who make this possible, this wouldn't happen at all. So I would say definitely an opportunity of blossoming, an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for maturation, and at the same time, an opportunity to really, really value and celebrate generosity. I mean, sometimes, Tansri Medo and I, we are very, very junior monks, right? Lumpo has seen this life for 50 years, Lumpo Sumedo even longer. But for us just to see, like, boy, we get fed so well. We get clothed, we get medicines, we have a place to live. And at the end of the year, there's no report card. There's no 360-degree evaluation. There are no metrics that we have to adhere to. There are no kind of evaluations that are handed. No, it's generosity given out of trust. And this kind of propels us to really commit further. And so, yeah, those are the things that kind of come to mind.
Thank you so much. It sounds to me like it's the osmosis of good. I love your use of the word osmosis.
It really is. Really is.
Yes. Well, you radiate goodness and kindness. So thank you. It's lovely. It's always lovely to visit.
Thank you. Yeah. Gabrielle from Edmonton. Hi, Gabrielle.
There, I unmuted.
Yes.
Oh, Bhante, so nice to meet you on Zoom and to see my other, new friends. And I just got so much from your talk. And I'd like to take it back to when you were talking about the gap in between thoughts, when there's that silence. And I know what you speak of, and it might be there for 1 or 2 seconds. And from what I understand, it's that gap that we want to expand. So, do you have any thoughts? Because I find the experience is that when I do move, or not I, but when the mind moves into that space and that silence, another part of the mind wants to go, oh, wow, there it is. And then, of
Yes,
course, it's
and
gone.
it's gone. Yeah.
Okay. So, what can you offer in terms of advice in moving into that space and that silence and still being able to hold it more than 2 seconds?
Right. That's a beautiful question. Gabriella, am I saying your name right?
Just Gabrielle.
Gabrielle. So that's a beautiful question, Gabrielle. Thanks for picking up on that. The first thing is, I mean, I can just tell you from my personal experience. Patience is the first thing. The next thing is actually being aware that this is happening. Just the fact that you're aware that when the mind goes silent, there's another part of the mind, or probably there's a thought that comes up saying, whoops, wow, there's the silence. And poof, that silence goes away. That in itself is huge. To be able to recognize A, that moment of silence, and B, this thought that intrudes on this moment of silence. And so being patient with that is a large part of adjusting to it. And the other aspect of it is not to have an expectation that, or not to have that desire that you want to expand this, but it's a cultivation of an attitude that says, I really value the space and the silence between thoughts. So you can actually do this intentionally. Just tell yourself, I value the space between thoughts, and try and make that kind of an aspiration that you're really dedicated to, that you're committed to, that you're loyal to. And all this is in the thinking process. I'm not denying that. But the result of that thinking process is that that part that always jumps up will gradually recognize and realize that, hey, it's not important to celebrate this moment, but it's actually important to just be silent. Right? And this is one way to understand Lumpur Sumedo's trust in awareness, because this needs patience, it needs dedication and commitment, but it also needs a huge sense of trust that at some point in time, this tendency of the mind to jump up when there's thought, when there's no thought, is going to subside. So I would say, when it comes to these heart faculties, so, there's the Noble Eightfold Path, and there's this word Samma. And so Samma Samadhi, or Samma Vayama, or Samma Sati. I'm not sure if I'm throwing out too many Pali terms. Gabrielle, are you familiar with these terms?
I am, Bhante.
Okay.
Yes.
So when we talk of this word Samma, right? Attunement is a really good suggestion of translating that word. The usual word is right. So right view, right, da, 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 da. But when it comes to these heart qualities, it's actually, I find it very useful to say inclination, inclining. moving your heart towards something, trusting in it. And so the more we incline towards that and we kind of value it, not so much as, the more we raise it up, right? And then we have patience and trust, it will automatically happen over a period of time. And it's not so much kind of a parsing out and saying, I have patience, but it's just that kind of inclination and that trust. It's an organic thing. So the more you're just patient with it, all these layers will unfold automatically.
Thank
Okay,
you. That is very helpful, Bhante.
Great, thank you.
Inclining the mind. I've heard another teacher describe it that way, and it's a word that I will use during my meditation. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sadhu.
It's okay. You're welcome. And Ludovic. Hey, Ludovic. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. You've gone off my screen. So what do I do?
I disappeared.
View. I'll do what Vivian told me. Gallery. I still don't see you. Oh, there you are.
Over here.
Yes. Yes. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's an interesting talk, and I've been doing a lot of walking meditation these days, and hearing you talk about this and thinking about my own practice, I realized that the gap phenomena seems to happen way more easily for me when I'm sitting down than when I'm walking, and I tend to go, so I don't get discouraged. I just go to metta right away if I feel it's too hard, because my in my mind I have a lot of things that are unresolved, so they just keep, I can see when coming in, okay, I have to do this, I let it go, but then I also have a bunch of other stuff to do, so they're all like one in the back. So then I just go to metta. And so is there any tips for walking meditation to try and figure that part out?
Well, one thing that you have to recognize is that walking is an active posture. So when we sit, so as I started in giving instructions or suggestions during our meditation, I kind of hinted or alluded that physical stillness will somehow have an effect on mental stillness. Now, in the same way, when the body is active, the mind also tends to be active initially, right? But as you stick with it, the mind will calm down. It could also be the case that, some postures work better for some people. So some people may be really, really good at walking meditation and their mind gets collected really quickly. They really respond well to that. They might not respond that well to a sitting posture. Now, how many of us have even tried standing posture? Right? Not very many people. We usually tend to move between walking and sitting, and that's the kind of hallmark of the forest tradition, where these two postures are encouraged. But I've been sick a lot, so I do a lot of lying down meditation, as taught by Luang Por. So you've got to actually figure out what posture works for you when. And it doesn't mean that just because walking meditation, you're more responsive to walking meditation now, 2 years down the line, you're going to be equally responsive. Might not be, right? And if we generally have an active mind, and if we generally have a lot of thoughts and concerns that we have to deal with, right? So your young family, your kids, your career, all of these things, right? They're lovely, everything's going well, but at the same time, these are things that need your attention, right? So your mind is very dynamic, it's filled with a lot of energy. As you're walking, not only does the energy of the body get expelled, the energy that's running your mind, that's behind pushing out these thoughts, that keeps getting dispelled as well, right? So there's a release. So the release you get while you're walking necessarily need not be the same release you get while sitting at this point in time, but that could change. So it's not that you have to have, it's okay to have one posture that works better for you and one posture that doesn't.
Okay.
Right? That would be my kind of response.
Perfect. Thank you. So not to worry, really.
Absolutely not.
Always.
Don't worry, be happy.
Yes.
Okay. And Flora. Hi, Flora.
Bhante, thank you. Your talk was really very, very profound and helpful in many ways. My question is a little different.
Mhm.
If we are trying to help someone who is going through depression and anxiety, and here I'm thinking about your words about the content of thought and the process and patterns of thought, because there seems to be like a circle that they cannot, a circle of thoughts that it is difficult for them to come out of. Are there ways in which we can open that up and try to unlodge the negative pattern?
That's a really good question, Flora. I'd like to start by saying that I'm not an expert on these matters. I don't have the experience that some of our more senior teachers have with dealing with this. But I have had a very, very close and loved relative who was suffering from depression for the last 12, 14 years of her life. She passed away during COVID. So even when I was an anagarika, a samanera, a monk, a bhikkhu, she was going through this, and I tried helping her as much as I could. So I'm just coming from that experience. This idea of looking at content, processes, and patterns is something that we can do and we can cultivate when our mind is not under the weight of depression, when our mind is not oppressed by too many toxic mind states, right? We have a capacity and we build on that capacity. So what can we do for someone who is very, very depressed? One thing that worked with my aunt and in my interactions with her was just to be patient, just to listen, really, and to really, really listen. Not listen and have kind of negative reactions going on, and you're trying to, that's inevitable when it gets too much, but to have that availability to say, I'm here and I'm listening. And then helping them to move towards practical measures that would help. So visiting a psychiatrist, visiting an expert, and if that expert feels that certain medication is needed, then encouraging that. But very often, when in my limited experience of dealing with depressed people, is that if they know that there is a presence that is stable, and they're somehow able to perceive that, and that this presence is supportive, this presence is patient, then that itself is enough to kind of give a little bit of relief to them. And so with my aunt, initially I used to try all kinds of things. I tried getting her to meditate with me. That was actually disastrous. I tried playing all kinds of music. I tried pampering her with gifts and with food and all kinds of stuff. None of that really worked. But what she really responded to was that somehow she felt that there was an anchor. So when I would just sit there and listen and say, you can throw whatever you want at me, I'm just listening. All I'm doing is receiving. Right? And she was so upset with me because I became a monk, and she thought I was wasting my life. So there was a lot of criticism. There was a lot of ill will. But the moment she knew that, okay, there's some, there's balance, there's an anchor, there's someone who I can rely on, that kind of changed the dynamic between us. So from my limited experience, that's all I can offer.
That's extremely helpful, Bhante. Thank you very much. And thank you for being so open. Thank you.
Hey, Jean. Hi, Jean. You're muted.
There we go. Yes, so nice to meet you, Bhante.
So nice to meet you too, Jean.
Yeah, thank you for your teachings. I have
pleasure.
a question about working with unpleasant sensation in the body when one is ill. And for me, it's a very minor illness, but the experience of attending to the breath is usually quite pleasant. And I think it's partly because the process of attending is pleasant in and of itself. But when there's a lot of unpleasant sensation that one is actually trying to avoid during sickness, can you give some suggestions for working with that, please?
Absolutely. So I've been battling is not the right word, but I've been kind of living with Lyme disease since 2017. So there's a lot of fatigue, there's a lot of physical pain, there are lots of unpleasant, is that your cat?
Yes.
A lot of unpleasant sensations, sometimes to the extent that it's not really conducive to even hold the breath in mind, right? So one thing that I kind of stumbled upon and that I found really, really effective was that I would actually, let's say if I had intense pain in my stomach, right? But I didn't have pain in my right shoulder. So what I would do is I would go to the stomach and actually attend to the pain in the stomach. really look at it, and then consciously shift my awareness to the shoulder and actually abide in the ease and relaxation and the non-pain in the shoulder. And I would try and actually try and bring in that feeling of ease into the stomach.
Okay.
Now it might seem as if it's a lot of doing, but it's not. The doing happens automatically because the moment you observe one part, at least for me, that's how it worked, was that the moment I observe one part of the body that's really cramping, achy, painful, and then I observe another part of the body that's relaxed, then somehow there's this effect that it carries over, right? It's not immediate, it's not instant, but just for the mind to know at that moment that there is something else that it can attend to apart from the pain gives a huge sense of relief. So it's not that the cramps in the stomach go away, right? Whatever is causing the cramps is still there, the cramps are still there. But the relief that one gets when the mind knows, here's something that's not that. Here's something that's kind of pleasant, you know? So again, this idea of kind of pushing out a wooden peg using another wooden peg kind of thing. And to substitute the object of attention, because very often with chronic pain, chronic fatigue, that's the only thing our mind goes to, right? At least my mind would always go to the most painful part of the body. But then by consciously drawing it away from that and focusing on a part that's not painful and that's kind of, that has a little bit of relaxation, ease, comfort, that allows the mind to kind of just relax and offer a little bit of reprieve. Removes the second arrow.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. It's similar to not attending to painful thought as well, to bring in something like the Brahma Viharas or create space in the mind.
Yeah, but again, it's just attending to the bodily sensation of it, and making that primary. Because what I when I tried doing the Brahma Viharas when I was lying in pain and totally fatigued, I didn't have the mental capacity to do that. But just to observe a part of the body that's not painful doesn't need that much of a mental impetus. And because it's rooted in the body, it's a little more tangible. So try that.
Thank you. I will. And I hope your health improves.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is on the mend. It is on the mend.
Very good.
Great. Okay, so it's 9:30. Shall we go to the closing homage? So, Vivian, if you could pop that thing up, the chant. Do I have to go to another view or, oh, no. I don't see it, Vivian.
That's funny. That's strange, Bante. I've got. I don't know. It's not showing that. For some reason, that chant isn't showing. I'm wondering now. Maybe Nisanka can share it. If I remove this security feature, Nisanka, could you share it on the screen? I don't seem to have it. It didn't. That wasn't a fun.
Right.
Thanks, Nisanka.
Something's happened. Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Perfect. So you can scroll down as we chant.
Yeah.
Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice. And through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavam Tang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Okay, thank you everyone. Have a good night. Thanks
Thank
for
you
joining us.
so much.